It is playoff time, baby. Welcome to the show, Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. Yes, it's playoff time. It might be Jalen Wright time, Isaiah Likely time, Phillip Rivers time. What? The Colts just signed him to the practice squad. He might be their starting quarterback in Week 15. I don't think he's going to be your starting quarterback on your fantasy teams in Week 15. Well, we welcome you, and we're glad that you're watching, because that means you've had a successful fantasy season, or you're just a huge fan. We appreciate it. I'm Adam Aizer with Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg. Now, listen, it's Tuesday. As you know, I've already made my waiver claims, but Dave Richard has already set all of his Week 15 lineups. Dave, that must have taken you a long time.
I don't have any Week 15 lineups because I am not playing in Week 15. It's not because I lost in every league. I made the playoffs in 6 leagues. I got a bye in all 6 of the leagues.
Nice.
That is wild, man. And what a nice little vacation you have this week. You just sit back and watch the game.
So I'm out of here. I'll see you guys later. Take care.
And Jamey, I just heard before the show, you have a lot of lineups to set this week.
I do have a lot of lineups set this week. I think I made the playoffs in 18 of 28 leagues. One is still pending, so we'll find out with the 10-team league for next week. A bye in only 5 of them, so I don't have the same success rate as Dave.
But I don't have the same success rate as you because I was in 12. Do we count guillotine leagues? And
not for playoffs, no. So I have 30 leagues total.
Okay, so 6 out of 11. And one of them was a dynasty league that I'm taking in. I'm kind of trying to make myself feel better because I don't feel good about making the playoffs in only 6 of 11 leagues. I like Jamey's hit rate better.
Yeah, very good. Maybe Jamey will start playing in a lot of leagues.
How many leagues did you make the playoffs in, sir?
I having such trouble. I think it was 5 out of 11. But if we take away 2 stupid dynasty leagues, 5 out of 9. So can we just go with that?
I think you and the Falcons are setting records for tanking.
Yeah, I'm a big tanker. No one tanks quite like I do, except tanking's not supposed to last multiple years, is it? Anyway, let's get to our top 3 overall priorities on the waiver wire this week. Dave, who do you got?
Well, it depends on whether or not Devon Achane is on your fantasy team. If Devon Achane is on your fantasy team, then Jalen Wright needs to be your priority. We think that Devon Achane is going to play. Suffered the rib injury, didn't finish the game last week against the Jets. He didn't have to finish the game. But if he's out, then Jalen Wright is absolutely going to be a stud in fantasy football leagues. You'd like to have that guy on your team. You'd like to have him anyway if he plays, but especially if you've got Devon Achane or if you're playing against a team that has Devon Achane. If you can't get your hands on him or if you don't want him, go to the DSTs. The 49ers DST would be my favorite. They've got the Titans. The Jaguars DST has been hot for the last 5 weeks. I would look for them. They take on the Jets. Those are 2 very favorable matchups for the DSTs. And then after that, it's kind of boring. It's Devin Singletary, Blake Corum, and Luther Burden.
And Jamey, how about you? Your top 3?
Yeah, I think if you're just looking at it, like who could win you your week, Dave said it, Jalen Wright, if he does start for the Dolphins, he could obviously go back to being a backup role. And in his backup role, he was essentially the 3rd running back because I think Ollie Gordon stays in his role, in tandem with whoever the starter is there as the goal line option. But we saw what Wright did against the Jets, and it's a somewhat favorable matchup against the Steelers. Their run defense has been very up and down lately, more down than up. And so there could still be an opportunity here, even if Achane plays. If the Dolphins have a lead, maybe they use Wright in tandem with him, give him some opportunities to continue to build off what he did last week. But obviously, if he's the starter for the Dolphins, that is the best player that you can find off waivers and can help you win in Week 15. But I think Dave listed most of the other guys. I think you just look at it as Singletary as the next running back up. The DSTs are obviously great options. Isaiah Likely has the best matchup of any player, regardless of position, taking on the Bengals. And then if you're stuck at quarterback, look, Daniel Jones now out for the season. He's been a starter for a lot of fantasy managers. Jaden Daniels, we know, may not play with that elbow injury. Marcus Mariota in 4 of 6 starts this season, over 20 fantasy points. Very good matchup against the Giants this week.
Indeed. Now, we don't know if Jaden Daniels is going to be ruled out, but we're leaning that way. So I did all my waiver claims, and I will give everybody on CBS a little bit of a warning. Jalen Wright is not showing up in the projections. So Sportsline must think that Achane's going to play. So if you go to your running backs, your available running backs, you're not going to see Jalen Wright there. And I forgot about him. I had to go back and look in all the leagues. I just slipped my mind. So if you want to put in a claim for Jalen Wright, you're going to have to search for him. He's only 3% rostered. So it starts with a W. You can figure it out yourself, but search for Jalen Wright.
Yeah, right. We should be okay. When we get to the Cowboys wide receiver, we may have a little bit of problem.
And we'll get to quarterbacks in a second, but I want to ask you guys with the DSTs, because I asked you, and I'll bring it up again. I asked you this morning about Jacoby Brissett and Patrick Mahomes in these tough matchups. Do you go to the waiver wire? With the DSTs, think about the Broncos. They've got the Packers at home, and the Rams have Detroit. Dave, are you going to the waiver wire for San Francisco or Jacksonville if you have the Broncos or Lions?
Absolutely. I view both the Niners and the Jaguars as top 5 DSTs this week. I won't go for them if I've got Seattle. And the Eagles, I know they played on Monday and it's a tough turnaround, but it's the Raiders. I think they're going to have a good game. And the Texans, they're up there too. Outside of those 3 DSTs, give me the Niners and give me the Jaguars.
Okay, and the last thing I'll say about that is I do have the Broncos. I put in bids for, I think, both of those DSTs, but I'm not dropping the Broncos. Next week, they have the Jaguars, which is good enough at home. So, don't drop the Broncos DST. All right, let's talk about the quarterbacks on the waiver wire and Mariota being one of the headliners. And look, you can take chances because half your league's been eliminated. 2 of the teams are on bye. So you might just be competing with 3 other managers on the waiver wire. So if you want to pick up Mariota and then pivot to someone else, if Jaden Daniels ends up playing, go for that. But Jamey, who are your favorite quarterbacks this week?
Mariota would be number 1. Just again, matchup against the Giants is amazing, as we've seen for the majority of the season. Top 3 in most fantasy points allowed to the position. Mariota has started 6 games for the Commanders this year, and in 4 of those, he's been over 20 fantasy points. He's been great with his legs. We saw the last game that he started against Denver. First game with him with his entire receiving core. Now he doesn't have Zach Ertz, but with Terry McLaurin, with Deebo Samuel, threw 50 times, over 40 rushing yards. And so if they allow him to play free like that, we know the run games have been basically non-existent for the Commanders. Maybe it shows up against the Giants because their run defense is so bad. But I think this is an opportunity for Mariota to be in that 20 to 23-point range, a low-end number 1 quarterback. So for me, in several leagues where I have Jacoby Brissett, this is probably the pivot play for me. Just looking at what Mariota's upside is. He's been very good as a waiver wire quarterback. Clearly, the track record's there. And so with Brissett taking on the Texans, I'm going to get away from that and probably go Mariota.
Brissett taking on the Texans going to be without his left tackle as well. So a lot going against him. CJ Stroud is number 2 on this list. Dave, he's facing the Cardinals, who have been struggling. They're pretty beat up on defense. Do you like CJ Stroud this week? Do you think he'll get to 20 fantasy points?
I think he can. We've seen 3 of the last 4 quarterbacks against Arizona get to 23 fantasy points, and that includes a game where Trevor Lawrence had 3 interceptions. So as long as CJ Stroud throws touchdowns before the game is in hand for Houston, I think he'll be okay. I'm just worried about him finishing as a top 12 quarterback. There's other names that are out there that are already rostered, but maybe you'd compare them to Stroud. Brock Purdy, Jackson Dart, Trevor Lawrence. I think Brissett's in that conversation. I think Marcus Mariota is in that conversation. I think all of those quarterbacks that I named are safer bets to get north of 20 fantasy points than I do CJ Stroud, because I'm not sure how well Arizona will compete in this game. I don't think they'll be able to run very well. Brissett might get his way into 20 fantasy points in garbage time. And I'm not sure how well the Texans will be able to run the ball, even though it's a very favorable matchup. I like Woody Marks. I'm starting Woody Marks. I don't know if Woody Marks is going to carry the day and have 22 carries for 135 yards and leave C.J. Stroud doing absolutely nothing. Doesn't mean C.J. Stroud's going to throw 4 touchdowns. I think Stroud can have an okay day. A lot of the other quarterbacks just have more upside.
This has been the layup spot, though, for Stroud when he's had these favorable matchups, when he's been at home. 2 of his last 3 over 22 fantasy points in his building. It is a building, right? They have a roof.
They have a roof. Building.
This is when, again, I don't think Dave's wrong. It's a trust factor with him because he just doesn't, since his rookie season, hasn't shown us the consistent play to say, okay, this is the type of quarterback I want to win my fantasy league with, to win my fantasy playoff matchup with. But, I mean, again, it's such a layup spot for him that if he does play well, these are the type of scenarios where he tends to do so. So I don't think it's a bad pivot play, again, if you're stuck. So for me, better than Brissett as well.
Yeah, but the thing you didn't mention is that it's a building when the roof is closed. It's a structure.
Building overall.
Okay. Look, hopefully most managers in the playoffs don't need to go to Tyler Shuck. That's the 3rd guy on Jamey's list. Then we have Shadur Sanders and we have J.J. McCarthy. With McCarthy having this brilliant fantasy playoff schedule of at Dallas, at the Giants, home against Detroit, He had a season high. 48% of his throws were under 2.5 seconds. Previous season high before week 14 was 34.4%. So they changed things around for McCarthy, and it worked to the tune of 26.4 fantasy points on only 23 pass attempts against Washington. Jamey, so you have it Shuck, Shedeur Sanders, and McCarthy. Dave, what would your order be of those three?
I would have Shuck, McCarthy, Shedeur Sanders. And it's not to slight Shedeur Sanders. He actually had his best game as a pro. The stats obviously show that, but he really did. He seems to be taking a step forward. And the offense really isn't that bad in Cleveland. I just can't foresee a scenario where I'd be excited starting Shedeur Sanders in a 1 QB league. We've talked about so many other quarterbacks that you'll feel better about starting, and it's totally reasonable to feel that way. It's the super flex leagues, it's the 2 QB leagues. That's where I'd be encouraged to consider Shedeur Sanders if I just lost Daniel Jones or Tyrod Taylor, and I'm really scraping to find that second quarterback.
I think in the case of, Shuck, you're right, Adam. Like, you don't want to trust these guys. Do you think a lot of people with Jalen Hurts would rather take the numbers that Tyler Shuck has put up the last 3 games? Like,
but you're not starting Shuck over Hurts, though.
No. I mean, of course, he's playing the Raiders. You wouldn't do that. And even in a tough matchup, you probably still wouldn't do that. But, again, these are the decisions that you have to make at times when you have a team that's struggling or needs some potential upside. And for the case of Shuck, for the case of Sanders, for the case of McCarthy, like, they're coming off strong games. In the case of Shuck and in McCarthy's situation, the matchups are fairly positive here. The thing I like about Shuck is he's done it in a variety of ways. He's already done it against his team once. Week 10 he had over 22 fantasy points against the Panthers. McCarthy makes me nervous just because it's so touchdown dependent. He doesn't get over 200 yards passing consistently. If he doesn't get multiple touchdowns, then you're really in trouble here. And I think the Cowboys defense, while they did not look good last week against the Lions, that's the Lions. Back home, they're building. I think the pass rush is going to be an issue because it's going to be up the middle in his face, and that's where I think McCarthy's going to struggle, even though he has Darisaw back. These receivers are just not making plays for him, which is a shame because of what Justin Jefferson typically does, and a lot of that really is on McCarthy. So I think there's a great opportunity here, and the track record suggests every quarterback against Dallas has done well. This is just one that makes me very nervous.
All right, and Dave, I think, kind of briefly mentioned it, but if you can find Brock Purdy on your waiver wire, Jackson Dart on your waiver wire, and if you're not playing on CBS, you have a pretty good chance at that because they're about 60 to 70%, 60 to 75% rostered across Sleeper, ESPN, and Yahoo. All right, we're going to take a break. We've got running backs and the Jalen Wright conundrum. What do we do here, especially because they've got a Monday night game, so they're going to wait an extra day to practice. So what do you do about Jalen Wright, and who are the shallow league running backs that you might be able to pivot to in certain leagues? We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. We are back to talk about waiver wire running backs for Fantasy Week 15, headlined maybe by Jalen Wright of the Miami Dolphins, who had a very nice game with about 16.7 fantasy points against the Jets. So welcome back, everybody. Adam Aizer, Dave Richard, Jamey Eisenberg. And I'm stalling because, it is time to play Who Has More, America's 10th favorite fantasy football-related game show. Who has more 100-yard games as a rusher, Jalen Wright or Quinshon Judkins?
It feels like a tie. I'm going to lean Judkins.
In their careers or this? Well, obviously it's careers. It's Judkins' rookie season. I'm going to say Judkins.
It's a tie.
Yeah. I can't wait for tomorrow's podcast.
It's a tie. That's always an option. It's always option C is a tie.
No, it's never an option. The game is who has more.
Yeah, no. What, the answer can't be nobody?
No.
Tie? 24 carries, 107 yards, and a touchdown. 3 targets, no catches for Jalen Wright, and he is 4% right. Yeah, and a half, basically. All right, so Jamey,
Start Bashal Tootin.
What are we doing here with him?
So I look at it this way. When you look at the running backs here, there's a chance Devin Singletary could be a flex. There's a chance if Blake Corum scores a touchdown, you'll be happy starting him as a flex. There's a chance Dylan Sampson can get you 7 to 9 fantasy points. Samaje Perine, Tajay Spears, all these guys. There is a chance if Jalen Wright starts for the Dolphins, you win your fantasy league because of it. And so when I look at that position, if I need 8 to 12, maybe I'll go with Devin Singletary because he seems to be the guy that has done better, at least with Jackson Dart. He might be the goal line option for the Giants based on what we've seen. But again, we really haven't seen Dart Singletary, Tracy, Kafka, all healthy for a full game. It just hasn't happened so far this season. So I'll take the chance on Jalen Wright, knowing that Achane may have a pain tolerance situation that could keep him out. It seems as if everything is trending in the direction of Achane playing, which is clearly the best scenario by far, because you want to have Devon Achane out there if you roster him. But if he's out, there's a league winner. So I'm going to take my chances on trying to get the league winner.
In one of the leagues I'm in, we do our fab runs Tuesday morning, and he went for 15% of our original fab. So that's what you should expect to spend. But that's what I would expect to spend on somebody who I need as a backup on my team. You said that there's a chance that he could have this great game. There's also a chance that he doesn't even get 5 carries in the game because Devon Achane is back healthy and he runs roughshod over the Steelers. And if that's the case, you're going to feel a little silly for spending all that fab on Jalen Wright. That's why if you've got Achane, you should do it. If your opponent has Achane, I get why you would do it. But otherwise, I can't justify it knowing that there are other players out there that I know will play and have a chance to have an okay game. It might not be as good as Jalen Wright if he's the lead guy for the Dolphins, but he also might play, and Jalen Wright might not.
Just one other scenario, because we've seen it now twice. This could be the third time. It's a big if. The Bills and the Ravens both had backup running backs go off against the Steelers. Last week, Keaton Mitchell was on his way to a great game before he got hurt. And in the Bills game, it was Ty Johnson and Ray Davis. Davis had the better game because James Cook took a couple series off. Who knows if the Dolphins do the same thing? I mean, this is a team that is very run-heavy right now. And if Achane may take a few snaps off, may take a series or two off, Jalen Wright could have one of those big performances. So if we're comparing him, let's say, to a Blake Corum or even a Devin Singletary, the touches may be the same. The matchup may be even better, though, for Jalen Wright. It's a big if, but it could happen.
And it's such a bummer. I mean, we haven't even really touched on this, but Devon Achane is playing out of his mind right now. I really hope you're rewarded. He came into the league. He came into the season with an injury, and he fell to the second round. It was a calf injury, I believe.
Yep.
And, there was some concern about it. He's been one of the best draft picks in fantasy, even though he was a second-round pick. So I hope the Achane managers get to use him.
He's in the discussion for fantasy MVP, without question.
Yeah. I said earlier, Jalen Wright's not showing up in the projections. Technically, he is just way down. But if you go, again, if you're on CBS and you're looking at the waiver wire running backs, you're probably not going to see Jalen Wright, so just search for him. Now, Dave, other guys, you've been talking about Devin Singletary. If Tyrone Tracy were available and Singletary were available, because Tracy's owned in or rostered in 79% of leagues, who would you prefer?
Tracy, that's easy. It looks like he's the better, he's the 1A to Singletary at 1B. And we've seen it now really since Cam Scadaboo's gotten hurt. Tracy's the better bet to get more targets and more catches and lead the running game. The one spot where I wish Tracy had a little bit of a larger role is at the goal line. And that might go back to fumbles that he's had near the goal line last year. I think he had one this year too. And maybe there's a trust issue between him and the coaches. Devin Singletary has that role, but that's part of the appeal to Devin Singletary off the waiver wire, and he's out there in more than half of CBS Sports leagues. He's given you at least 10 PPR points in 3 of his last 4. It's not a sexy name, but it's somebody, if you're hurting at running back and you need somebody, he's got the matchup, he's got the goal line role. He may not lead the Giants in carries, but he'll be close behind Tyrone Tracy. He's not a bad option in Week 15 fantasy play.
And there is still the potential. If Tracy's hip injury that he suffered Week 13 Monday night, if that's an issue and he doesn't practice, Singletary vaults over Jalen Wright and becomes the number 1 player to go get without question.
But if they were both out, who would you prefer? Like if Achane,
I would, yeah. If Achane's out and Tyrone Tracy's out, I'd rather have Wright than Singletary. Yes.
Who are you more confident in that's going to play this week, or both, Achane or
they're both going to play?
Tracy?
I think they're both going to play.
Yeah, it sounds like they're both going to play. I mean, you just have to, see what happens as the week unfolds.
All right, other running backs to consider. Yeah, there's Blake Corum. He's had 3 games this year with more than 6 PPR fantasy points. And now he has the number 1 or the worst matchup. I think actually they're now second worst, Detroit. But look, you see what's going on with Blake Corum. It's exciting. Dylan Sampson, Samaje Perine. I'd rather talk about, just in case these guys are available, Kenneth Gainwell, Ramondre Stevenson, Chuba Hubbard, Devin Neal, Tony Pollard, Chris Rodriguez. Is there a must-add in that group, Jamey? That would be Gainwell, Ramondre, Chuba Hubbard, Devin Neal, Tony Pollard, Chris Rodriguez.
They're all flex options for me, but the one I like the best is Devin Neal because the matchup against Carolina, the workload has been fantastic. He scored 11 plus PPR points, including the game that Kamara got hurt. So it's been 3 games if you factor that one in. So in 2 of the 3 games, over 11 PPR points. Last week, finally scored a touchdown against the Dolphins. The Panthers matchup tends to be very up and down. It's usually been favorable. Kamara had a big game against them in Week 10. But we know how this offense tends to work, and now Tyler Shuck is stealing some rushing opportunities, some touchdown opportunities. So I think you just look at Neal as a flex, but we don't know exactly what Hubbard's role is going to be. Last time we saw him, he was awesome against the Rams, but is that going to be something that's sustainable? Because we have a whole body of work since he came back from the calf injury, and it just was not the same. Rodriguez is so touchdown dependent that if he doesn't score, it's absolutely miserable. Stevenson, the last time we saw him before their bye week, was better than Trevion Henderson, but again, we know what that's been. It's a great matchup, though, against Buffalo. So there's flaws for all these guys. I don't want to chase the Tony Pollard big game against the Browns. It was awesome, but the whole season has just been so bad for them that, again, is that something that you can count on, especially against a rested San Francisco defense? So you're just looking at what Neal did, what he has done in the 3 games that Kamara's been injured. As long as Kamara's out, he'd be the one I'd target first.
All right, I'm going to finish this segment with kind of a starter sit angle here. So the question is really, I guess, Dave, if you have this guy, do you feel like you're safe starting him, or would you go to the waiver wire, which isn't the easiest thing. It's not like they're just easy plug and play starting running backs, but maybe there's a wide receiver you want to pick up. But anyway, how about Omarion Hampton at the Chiefs? You feel good enough about him?
Yeah, I feel good enough about him. I think he'll see more playing time and more touches this coming week.
How about Woody Marks against the Cardinals?
He's a top 24 running back this week.
I mean, it's exciting. An
Borderline
opportunity.
top 15 with Chubb's injury.
I know, man. I'm looking at a team with Kyron Williams against Detroit and Woody Marks against Arizona.
But you hate Kyron Williams, though.
You know Woody Marks getting more carries.
I do know Woody Marks getting. Look, I love Woody Marks this week. He's in the discussion for start of the week. Like, there's just a lot of upside, but he's had a lot of touches for basically the last month and hasn't done much with them. But just the fact that Nick Chubb may not play, the matchup, like you said, is great. They're at home. They haven't been at home recently, so there's a huge opportunity for Woody Marks. I think he's just a good start. I don't know if you want to say better than Kyron Williams, though.
How about Trevion Henderson against Buffalo?
Flex at best. Can't feel good about where he stands in that offense with Ramondre Stevenson back and what we saw against the Giants before their bye.
I think you're hoping with Henderson that they're behind, and we see him involved in the passing game.
Yeah, he scored 11.1 and 11.6 PPR fantasy points at Cincinnati and home against the Giants. So, yeah, I know Buffalo's a great matchup, but so were those. All right, last one. You feel good about Javonte Williams against Minnesota this week?
Number 2 running back.
Yeah,
I think borderline number 1 guy. Like, he gets so much work, and they're at home. The Cowboys' offense is fantastic. He's the lead running back. Like, I'm not getting cute with Devin Singletary over Javonte Williams.
Sure. Okay. All right. Wide receivers. Who's it going to be this week? Who's our favorite wide receiver? Someone we're pretty excited about. We'll tell you about him and more when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. Talking wide receivers right now on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. And Luther Burden's going to be one of our top wide receivers. So it is time for America's 8th favorite fantasy football-related game show. It is time for Who Has More among wide receivers with 40 or more targets. Who has more yards per route run? Luther Burden or Nico Collins?
I'll say Burden.
I'll say Ty.
You're both wrong. See, isn't this more difficult? It's Nico Collins. Luther Burden or Jamar Chase?
Chase.
Dave, you said Ty?
I'm just going to say Ty from now on.
It is wrong, and so is Jamey. Jamey's horrible at this game. It is Luther Burden. He's averaging more yards per route run than Jamar Chase, more yards per target than CeeDee Lamb, I believe. He's
Sounds
having
like
a really
you're
nice...
saying we should start Luther Burden as the top wide receiver in fantasy this week.
I think that's exactly what I'm saying. No, but Jamey, he is your top waiver wire wide receiver. Who else do we like?
I think Jayden Reed deserves some looks. For fantasy leagues, it's a tough matchup against Denver, and then they get Chicago next week. But We've been waiting for him to come back. It's a very crowded receiving core. I was just actually reading one of the Packers beat writers. They were ranking the receivers off of last week's game. They had Reed second behind Watson, which makes sense. Romeo Doubs still plays the second amount of snaps, or at least last week played the second most amount of snaps behind Christian Watson. But Doubs only 2 targets, did not have a big involvement like we've been used to. And so Reed 2 carries, 4 targets in the game, caught all 4 of them. So hopefully we see a bigger role as he shakes off the rust. Again, you're not going to probably start him outside of the deepest of 3 receiver leagues against the Broncos, but we have seen secondary receivers against Denver, certainly the ones that avoid Patrick Surtain, do well. So I think the Packers will be creative to get him the ball. But Jaden Reed's somebody I think you want to definitely look at as a potential starter in 3 receiver leagues.
And Dave, not to skip over Luther Burden, where are you going to have him ranked this week against Cleveland?
He's in the range of a number 3 wide receiver, so he is flexible. If you're looking for some help at wide receiver, maybe you're nervous about those Colts wideouts going up to Seattle with a big question mark at quarterback, you could pivot to Luther Burden. And look, last week, career high, season high, it's the same thing in routes run. He's had at least 5 targets in 4 straight games. He should be able to get you to double-digit PPR points. It is contingent on Rome Odunze not being active for Chicago. They say he's week to week, so it seems unlikely that he's going to play at this point. That's going to put Burden on the field more. And we saw him as a reliable short and intermediate target for Caleb Williams against the Packers. Easier matchup this week against the Browns, especially if the Browns don't have Denzel Ward, their top cornerback. That's going to help a lot. And Caleb is going to need to get the ball out faster against that pass rush. It sounds like a perfect storm for Luther Burden, which is why he's a top 36 wide receiver for me.
If CeeDee Lamb were out, Jamey, what would you expect from Ryan Flanoy? He's 1% rostered, had 115 yards and a touchdown on 13 targets. That was with Lamb playing more than a half, a little bit more than a half, at Detroit last week. What would you expect from Flanoy?
I think he'd be in the number 3 receiver discussion. You're looking at a very tough matchup against Minnesota. They're number 2 in fewest fantasy points allowed to wide receivers for a reason. They're just really good. And so the hope would be is that the Cowboys in their building, Dak Prescott still throwing the ball a lot, so volume would help Flanoy. I think you'd have to look at him as at best the 3rd option because of George Pickens and what Jake Ferguson does when one of the other 2 wide receivers is missing. So can he have another dominant game? Probably not. Can he be in that Luther Burden range in terms of production? 5 catches, 60 yards, something like that, 11, 12 PPR points. I think that's probably the ceiling. If he scores, you'll be thrilled about that. But again, we're talking about desperate situations because you are in the fantasy playoffs. You're just trying to attach yourself to a good offense. And so very similar to Jalen Wright. If there is an absence of CeeDee Lamb, this guy becomes the next man up. You've seen one game of just amazing production. So that's the type of player I like to try and gravitate toward. So as a last waiver wire move, as opposed to holding on to a Quentin Johnston at this point or another player that's just not going to be in my starting lineup at all. If CeeDee Lamb is out and I need a 3rd receiver, this guy could win me my league.
All right, let's play a new game. Right now, just cracking the top 50, America's favorite fantasy football game shows. It's called 12-Team League. And the question is just, is this guy worthy of being rostered in a 12-team league? So on today's show of 12-Team League, Chimere DK. 12-Team League?
Yes. Especially if special teams yardage counts.
Devon Vele.
Yes.
I'll say no.
Darius Slayton.
Yes.
Could be a flex guy.
Jamey, you got awfully big rosters in these 12-team leagues.
That's why I play in so many leagues.
Jalen McMillan.
No.
IR spot still, so stash him just to see what happens.
What if there are no IR spots?
Then no.
IR spots? That's top 70 game show.
No one wants to watch that show.
Jack Besh.
No.
12-team dynasty league?
Yes. Jack Besh. Andre Yoshevus.
No.
I'm going to say no.
Pat Bryant.
No.
I'm going to say no, too. Look, I don't really want to carry a lot of depth at receiver. We're in the fantasy playoffs. If there's a receiver that I wouldn't feel comfortable starting, I'd rather dedicate that roster spot to a running back or maybe a backup quarterback or tight end. Depends on your roster makeup. Certainly carrying 2 DSTs is absolutely a choice that fantasy managers can make this year, where you've got 1 DST for week 15, another one for week 16, something like that, where you can map out the matchups because you're playing 3 more weeks and then that's it. You can see what looks favorable from the DST standpoint. You could do that with kickers too if you really want to. Just get kickers that are playing indoors. But that's how I would prefer to craft my benches in fantasy football leagues at this point in the season.
Yeah, and that brings me to let's talk about the Colts guys, and let's talk about the Chargers, because both, other than McConkey, no one's going to drop him, and I don't think anyone's going to drop Pittman. But, let's take a look ahead to Week 16, because we don't know what the Colts passing game is going to look like this week, but at Seattle is brutal for wide receivers. But the Chargers are at Dallas in Week 16, and Indianapolis gets San Francisco at home. So they have favorable matchups in Week 16, whereas both teams have bad matchups in Week 15. So I guess my question is, if you have any of the Chargers receivers not named Lab McConkey and any of the Colts receivers, including Michael Pittman, Jamey, would you consider dropping any of them this week?
Not even close to dropping Alec Pierce. Definitely not dropping Pittman or McConkey. I mean, Quentin Johnston is on the fence. Keenan Allen is done. Like, he hasn't done anything since about week 5 or 6. So it's easy to get rid of him. I think in the case of Quentin Johnston, you're hoping for a touchdown or bust, and we just have not seen that since the offensive line has fallen apart. Like, the downfield throws haven't been there. Justin Herbert, give him credit. What Jim Harbaugh said about him, playing like a superhero last night, Monday night was legit. Like, he, a week after surgery, he's still stiff-arming people, running for 66 yards, so just doing whatever he can to get his team to win. That doesn't help us as fantasy managers, unfortunately. So I think in the case of McConkey taking on the Cowboys, yes, you're most likely going to start him, especially if we see a strong game from the passing attack for the Chargers if they do so against the Chiefs in Kansas City. I think in the case of the Colts, it's such a wild card right now because of the quarterback situation. But what did we see from Pierce and Pittman after Daniel Jones went down? They still were productive with Riley Leonard. I think Rivers will be good enough if he's a starter. I think Brett Rippon or Riley Leonard, again, will be good enough to get these guys enough production that you're starting them in 3 receiver leagues in that matchup against San Francisco. This week against the Seahawks, it's easy to say, okay, at best you're starting them in 3 receiver leagues. Pierce has been awesome. And Pittman, the body of work over the course of the season has been just so solid. So I think if you're putting those guys on the waiver wire, you asked about Chimere Dike, we're talking about Luther Burden, we're talking about these guys. They don't have the resume that those 2 Colts receivers have. So I'm not getting those. I'm not giving my opponent the opportunity to start those guys against the 49ers against me.
Okay, that's a good way to look at it for sure. And then we really like Juwan Jennings if he's available. He's about 85% rostered in CBS Sports League, so take a look for him. And then Mike Evans. Dave, if Mike Evans plays this week on Thursday, against Atlanta, would you start Mike Evans?
I would in 3 receiver leagues. I'd go right back to him, and I think the Bucs need him. They need a big target that can catch some off-target throws from Baker Mayfield and a reliable set of hands. That's something that Emeka Egbuka has seemingly lost over the last few weeks. I think it would be a big plus to Tampa to have him back in there.
Okay. All right, well, and also Garrett Wilson, eligible to return now, and we'll see if he plays, but see if he plays at some point this season. Not the worst guy to have on your team, and you could still put him in an IR spot if you have that available. 78% rostered Garrett Wilson. Tight ends, loaded position most weeks this year, and this week seems pretty good as well. We'll tell you who to pick up at the tight end position when we come back. And we're back here on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. And we're talking tight ends for the waiver wire for Week 15. Now, we haven't been on the air for this particular show in a few weeks. And I just want to say, I don't know that we got a chance to say what we're thankful for. I'm thankful for Dave and Jamey and Heath and all the people that work on the show. I'm thankful for so many things. I'm very, very thankful for how the Cincinnati Bengals cover tight ends. It gives us great options every week. I think it's our first show since Thanksgiving. So I didn't get a chance to say it, but thank you to the Bengals for being so bad at this. And Jamey, that's why Isaiah Likely is your number 1 tight end. Now, there are other guys like Harold Fannin Jr. who are available in fewer leagues, but in terms of widely available guys, Kyle Pitts another one, but widely available guys, Isaiah Likely tops the charts this week.
I mean, look, he could have been an absolute monster the last 2 weeks, one of those against the Bengals where he had the fumble going in on a 43-yard touchdown. Last week, if they counted his touchdown, which should have happened against the Steelers, like we were talking about a guy that has 12.5 PPR points on the dot in each of the last 2 weeks. That should have been north of 18 PPR points if those touchdowns counted. So he's just playing better. He's more involved. We know the matchup is as good as any matchup for any position because the Bengals, like you said, are just so amazing at giving fantasy points to that spot. So Mark Andrews could easily have the big week for the tight end against Cincinnati, but you just see it. Last week it was Dawson Knox, it was Dalton Kincaid, it was Shavers also catching a touchdown. Like, there's just so much that they love to give to the tight end position. We had a game against the Steelers, I believe it was week 4, where 4 touchdowns to the Steelers tight end trio of Darnell Washington, Pat Freiermuth, and Jonnu Smith. Like, they just love to give up touchdowns, and I think Isaiah likely has another opportunity to sort of solidify himself as a potential starter rest of season. Like, what he's done these last couple of weeks, imagine if he wasn't hurt to start the season. We may have had a great breakout season for him the entirety of the way. So with Lamar Jackson looking better, Isaiah Likely's matchup, like, to me, he's a top 10 tight end this week.
How do you feel about Isaiah Likely, Dave? Because obviously there is some risk. He's not the number 1 tight end necessarily for the Ravens. He might be, but he's kind of like a 1A, 1B. So what do you think?
I think he might be the number 2 pass catcher for the Baltimore Ravens. And if you think about him through that lens, it's very exciting. And just to put a fine point on how bad the Bengals are, 11 tight ends have at least 10.7 PPR points against Cincinnati in their last 9 games. 11 in 9. So there's a real chance that Andrews and Likely, I think Jamey just talked about this, I think there's a real chance that both of them could score, both of them could have a good game for your fantasy teams, but Likely is the more explosive of the two. His target share has been high over the last 2 games, certainly at least the highest that it's been this season, at least 18%. That's pretty good. I think that we should view Isaiah Likely as a big-time target. And on the Lamar Jackson front, because really he hasn't looked amazing in a long time. But I think he threw the ball better for the most part last week. And the week before, he had a bunch of touchdowns that were called back. He seems to be rounding into form at the perfect time for Baltimore. I know that didn't result in a win last week. They should have a win this week against Cincinnati, a defense that won't get much pressure on him. He can find Isaiah Likely a bunch of times. In fact, Adam, if you're good at running back, you're good at wide receiver, you're good at quarterback, and you're really good at DST, this is the player to go after on the waiver wire first and foremost, is Isaiah Likely.
Over Luther Burden?
Yes. Over everybody, because there's going to be a bunch of teams in your league. Not everybody in your league is going to be set at tight end. Now, even if you've got Trey McBride, you could play keep away with Isaiah Likely and just put him on your bench so that your opponent can't use him now or in future weeks. But I really believe that he'll end up being a good pass catcher and a good difference maker for the Ravens and a top 10 tight end, like Jamey said.
Okay. Colston Loveland, Jamey, and Dalton Schultz are next on your list. Do you have a preference, one over the other?
Schultz over Loveland, just based on what his body of work has been. Loveland, 2 of the last 3 games, has done a nice job finding the end zone, and I do think the matchup against Cleveland, while we've seen Cleveland at times do well against tight ends, I think just looking at Odunze's absence, that helps Colston Loveland's situation. But Dalton Schultz, look, the Cardinals are terrible against tight ends. Schultz, 4 of his last 6 games, over 11 PPR points. I know 2 of the last 3 have not been good, but you're talking about a game against Buffalo, a game against Kansas City. This is just much more of a layup spot for him. So I like the opportunity for Schultz. I don't think he has as high a ceiling, let's say, as Isaiah Likely, but he has a much better floor. So if you're talking about PPR, who has a chance to be a little bit safer, I think it's Schultz. But again, the upside favors somebody like Likely. But 11, 12 PPR points, I think Dalton Schultz could get there again. 5 for 60, 5 for 70, that type of game, 6 for 60. He can certainly get you those type of numbers because he's been doing it pretty regularly since about the midway part of the season with Davis Mills and with C.J. Stroud.
Okay, give me. Let's get the Lyco meter out. How much do you like these guys this week? Mike Gesicki, assuming T. Higgins is out. Mike Gesicki against Baltimore, 0 to 10 on the Lyco meter.
5.
What'd you say, Jamey?
3. We saw this, play out already once. No T. Higgins. It was the first game back for Joe Burrow. Take that for what it's worth. And let's give Gesicki credit. He did score a touchdown against Buffalo, which isn't easy to do, but that was in some pretty horrible conditions. So I just think Baltimore's track record against tight ends suggests that Gesicki, not great this week, but if Higgins is out, this could be multiple weeks with this concussion. Gets the Dolphins next week. I love that for him.
True. How about, real quick, guys, Theo Johnson against Washington, who's 28th against tight ends?
7.
Yes, I agree, 7.
Colby Parkinson against Detroit?
5.
6.
Kyle Pitts against Tampa Bay?
55.
8.
Darren Waller at Pittsburgh.
3.
2.
Dalton Kincaid at New England.
54.
7.
Harold Fannin Jr. At Chicago.
53.
9.
Couple tough ones, I think, to end it. Brenton Strange against the Jets.
6.
4.
Juwan Johnson against Carolina.
6.
5.
We secretly just gave out Dave's phone number. We will be back after this with your questions. Our favorite part of the show, we get to hear from you. Thank you very much for participating. When we come back on Fantasy Football Today, we'll answer your questions right here. Let's see what's on your mind. Thank you so much for your questions. This is a great question from Eric. Eric, if it's a 50-50 decision come playoffs, better off picking up the better player or the better matchup? Dave, what's your take on this?
It really depends. The better player suggests that it's a stud, and you never really want to go to battle without your studs, but you can't ignore better matchups either. I would probably lean toward player over matchup.
You have Justin Jefferson, who's the better player than almost everybody you line him up against, and he's been terrible, versus somebody, let's say, like,
But Jefferson has a good matchup this week, too.
He does, but he's not been performing well even in good matchups. So, like, for me, I would rather start Wan'Dale Robinson than Justin Jefferson this week.
Sure. Now, if you told me Jalen Wright were going to be the starter, you could justify him over
almost every running back outside of the top 10.
Right. RJ Harvey has been great, but I have to decide Harvey against Green Bay this week, or Woody Marks against Arizona, or Travion Henderson against Buffalo. Who do you guys like, Harvey, Marks, or Henderson?
Harvey slightly over Marks, but that's very, very close. Keep an eye on Nick Chubb's situation. But Harvey looked great last week, and I think he'll have some success against the Packers in the passing game.
I agree.
Next, please. All right, Jamey, I don't know if you have the list in front of you. I do, but you had the Week 16 DSTs. So 49ers are at the Colts, and they have a good matchup this week, too, against Tennessee. The Vikings are at the Giants. The Saints get the Jets, and the Cardinals get Atlanta. And I would also throw in the Chiefs, 66% rostered. They are at Tennessee. They have Chargers this week and at Tennessee next week. So take a look at I think the big ones would be the 49ers, the Chiefs, and the Vikings.
I do have the list out, and you want me to answer? Oh, no, you got it. Okay, good.
I got you, my man. All right, what's next? You know what, Jamey? I'll let you do this one. Pick up Jerry Jeudy if you're desperate.
I have the Jerry Jeudy scouting report in front of me if you want me to handle. Look, Jeudy looked great last week against the Titans. It was the Titans. He's not horrible comparatively to some wide receivers. Like, I'd start him over Quentin Johnston, for example, if you've been, unfortunately going that route. But he's just been tough to trust, and I don't want to chase the game that the Browns had against the Titans.
I don't want to chase that type of game either, but this is Shadur Sanders, who is improving as a thrower. Without much pass rush on him, the Bears' pass rush is a problem, and Judy's running routes downfield. All I'll say is you could do worse than Jerry Jeudy off the waiver wire. I would rather play it safe with somebody like Luther Burden over Jerry Jeudy this week.
All right. Time for one last question here. Oh, Jamey, you got the guillotine advice here?
Yes, obviously go get Christian McCaffrey. Look, Jamar Chase has been awesome. Jonathan Taylor is a little tough to trust right now. McBride clearly has been fantastic also, but tough matchup. But McCaffrey's the best player of the four guys you have here. So if you have the money to spend, you go get him.
And hello, it's Tennessee, Indianapolis, and Chicago to round out the season for McCaffrey.
And that's it for Fantasy Football Today. Check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast anywhere you listen. Thanks a lot to Dave and Jamey, and for all of you for watching and listening. I'm Adam Aizer. Good luck in Week 15.